Welcome to Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur, Ahmed.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have Wakil Wealth Advisory here as well. And I guess let's go ahead and get into a little bit about your story, about how you actually started Wakil Wealth Advisory. But even before that, how you even got into the finance space. Where did you study? What did you do? And let's go ahead and start with that, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. And Bismillah. Being a child of an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
right? My mother came to this country literally with nothing in her pocket, and she had to learn everything on her own. And I remember growing up, money was a struggle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Going from the basics of budgeting and writing checks, right? And I can't imagine anybody does that these days, with Venmo and credit cards. But just watching the struggle of an immigrant parent. And, I'm very thankful that as I was growing up, when she had to learn things the hard way, she was the first person, who would take me into the bank and how to fill out a deposit
Oh,
slip
wow.
and how to write a check out, right? And, for me, finance was always something that was of interest to me, but not really so keen. So growing up, having been around finance a little bit, I remember my uncles, they would be watching CNBC and I would see the scrolling ticker on the bottom and I really didn't know what it was. And they were like, hey, you need to go into that business, so you can go make a lot of money. But, all those numbers and fractions never made any really sense to me. So having been brought up in Miami, Florida, when I finished my, elementary school, middle school, high school, and started college, I was a computer science major at first. And I'm talking about like the early 2000s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always been a tech nerd and loved, computer programming and so forth. But when I was ready to make a decision on what it is that I wanted to do, um, there was an inflection point in the early 2000s where like computer science was crashing and like all the finance jobs were on the up and up. So right before the housing crisis of 2008 2009, I mean, I remember talking to all my peers and everybody wanted to be either like a mortgage broker or a real estate agent, right? And you could see that's where all the wealth was being
Mm-hmm.
created. So for me, while I was still trying to figure out, what it is that I wanted to do, I had the opportunity, and my first job out of high school was at Best Buy. So I
Mm-hmm.
was doing a lot of sales and retail, hopped around between Best Buy, CompUSA before that was a thing, and
Even Circuit City,
Circuit
probably.
City.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, I was at Circuit City for a little bit too. And one of my colleagues who took me from Best Buy to Circuit City, and then from Circuit City, jumped over to a financial institution that got acquired, Wachovia Bank.
Oh, really?
So he went to Wachovia Bank, and several weeks later, he came over back to Circuit City and visit, and he's like, "Listen, you're really good at sales. I really think it would be beneficial to
Mm-hmm.
you if you were to at least go have a conversation with the hiring manager." I was like, hey, what's the worst that could happen? Why not? So I went and spoke to the hiring manager and saw that, we had that, being in retail, there's just a level of skill set that's acquired in terms of like qualifying your prospect, how to cross sell, things of that nature. And lo and behold, I was given an opportunity, and I became a personal banker at Wachovia Bank in South Florida. And my first branch was in an area called Margate. And from there, as a financial or a personal banker, we qualified our prospects that came in, and if they needed a checking account, et cetera, cross sell all the solutions of the bank. And I had an opportunity to become licensed. And what licensing did for you is to be able to sell investments to these prospects. So fast forward, and mind you, I had still not completed my education. I was still going to school at the time. And once I got into banking and in the investment side of the business, that's when I knew for sure that finance was going to be the direction that I head in. Unfortunately, the housing crisis came about right
Mm-hmm.
in 2007, 2008, and the markets crashed. Um, I remember foreclosures were through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Unemployment was its all-time high. The Fed had to come in and make extraordinary moves to prop up the economy. And for me, as much as it also had a personal impact on my own career, that's where I was like, okay, you know what? This is exactly what I wanted to do. So I finished my education at an institution called Nova Southeastern University.
Mm-hmm.
They are, if anybody knows Nova Southeastern, they're known for that's where the Miami Dolphins training camp is.
Mm-hmm.
So I was used to see the Dolphins train there off season when I would be attending classes. And coincidentally, several years passed by. I had an opportunity to join a well-known financial institution down in Miami, and that's where my career started. And I spent about 15 years there, learned the business in various different capacities from serving high net worth clients and then climbing up the ladder in leadership. And I've had various different capacities from local branch leadership to regional leadership, and had served in operations, compliance, regulatory affairs, and then also sales management. So after spending 15 years there, last year, October 7th occurred. And I really took an opportunity to say, you know what, I could be doing something better. There was a reflection point for me. And for me, it was, how can I serve the Muslim community now more so ever? Not that that was not in my mind, but October 7th was the tipping point for me. And then at that point, I knew working at this financial institution that the Muslim community was very underserved for several reasons. The education aspect of it, there is a taboo when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the topic of money, and I just felt that there was an opportunity not to capitalize on, but to uplift the ummah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know how to start it or how or what to do and
Mm-hmm.
so forth and so forth. But I knew what my why was. So that was the stepping stone. And by the grace of God, I had an opportunity to meet some mentors. And when I started talking to having conversations with mentors, they were like, well, if you wanted to go work for yourself, what is it that you wanted to do? At first, it was real estate because I've always also had this side finesse for real estate. But then I knew that having conversations with my mentor, that gosh, you speak to any Muslim and any Muslim is involved in real estate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I know that was going to be a crowded market. And then we kept on having conversations on every Saturday morning. And he's like, listen, why don't you go do what you do best? And that falls into the category of like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, be passionate about what it is that you want to do. And for me, it was, again, that same passion that got me into the finance industry. And that was, helping others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Watching my mom struggle with her finances and having the pleasure of working with high net worth families and preserving growing their capital. um, I was like, why not just take that skill set
Mm-hmm.
and get and apply it in the Muslim community? So I drafted a business development plan. I set targets for myself, how I was going to achieve those targets, what my business development plan was like, and gosh, fast forward almost a year later, my company's up and running. We've raised assets. I've built some very reputable relationships, and the business continues to grow. And gosh, nothing would make me more happier to be a trusted wealth advisor to the Muslim
Mm-hmm.
community, particularly in Atlanta, but hopefully nationally.
Oh wow. So much to unpack there.
Yeah,
But give me 1 second.
sure.
Give me 1 second. Yeah, I'm gonna just turn on the AC.
Okay.
Just realized the AC wasn't on. Give me 1 second, bro. It's 79, bro. Okay. So, so while you were at Wachovia, I guess the next progression after that, where did you work after that?
So I did a few stints at smaller shops.
Mm-hmm.
They're not known in the public realm, but what it did give me exposure to was um, at least in the financial institution space, right? How small entities are regulated and how they run their operations is very different than financial institutions of scale, right? So thinking of like the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, the Merrills of the world. So that gave me exposure to entrepreneurs, right? So folks who were creating businesses from the ground up, how they were managing their finance operations, and so forth and so forth. So I did a couple of stints at smaller shops, and then and that was between the housing crisis when Wachovia was acquired by Wells Fargo in 2008, and then in 2009 I did these small stints between 2008 to 2010, and then in 2010 I landed at a very reputable firm where I spent the last 15 years, and then set up my own shop.
95% of you guys are not actually subscribed to my channel. And that hurts a little. Honestly, you know why? Because it sort of helps me if you guys can subscribe to my channel to help me grow my audience. And my goal is to hit 100,000 subscribers. That's a personal goal of mine. And I think that you guys can help me out. If you can like, comment, share, help me spread the word of Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur, I would really appreciate it. It would help me grow the channel. It'll allow me to get better guests. If you guys can do that, just that one little thing for me, I would really appreciate it. Let's get on back to the pod.
Just out of curiosity, for the viewers, what is liquidity event?
A liquidity event is when you have a business owner who is getting ready to get a capital injection from whether it's a venture capital or private equity fund, and their equity is being bought out, and in exchange of that equity, they're getting cash or any other financial instrument, right? And or it could be that the company is already private right now and they're well capitalized and they're going public. So that's more or less a liquidity event.
Got it. And then another common financial term that we hear a lot, at least in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, was leverage buyouts or LBOs. Maybe you can bring some light to what that is, and is that even applicable to a Muslim in today's modern day and age?
And from the context of Sharia compliance, probably not. LBOs, because LBOs is essentially you're leveraging existing assets, right, to acquire a company that becomes. I mean, LBOs could be used in various different strategies, right? But from a Sharia compliance perspective, I don't think that strategy would ever fly if somebody was looking to run their business from an Islamic finance view.
Isn't it because mainly you're utilizing debt?
Correct.
And what if you replace the debt with equity?
But then at that point, it's not
It's not a leveraged
leveraged.
buyout, yeah.
Correct. You're actually getting a capital infusion, right, from outside investors that comes on the equity side of your balance sheet, and then you can go and acquire. But when you, as a business, right, depending on what kind of how of a reputable entity you are, there's a term called cost of capital, right? So some institutions their equity cost of capital may be higher versus debt, and the inverse may be true. So for when somebody's raising capital and they want to say, hey, what can we get that will be the cheapest cost of capital to acquire another business, that answer may be whether it's equity or debt. But from a Muslim perspective, it's always going to be equity.
Equity, of course, right? Because the ownership structures definitely matter. Sorry. Where did this desire for Islamic finance or going towards the Sharia or Sharia-compliant investments come from? Because normally, if you were born and raised here, people don't typically talk about it, especially if you were born in the 80s or early 90s, for example. Where did the drive or intent come from?
Particularly for me?
Yeah.
So, when, again, going back to the incident that occurred last year, there was a lot of conversations about, particularly in the social aspect, right? Muslims getting involved in politics, getting involved in their communities, and really getting a hold of how is it that we can, how do we vote with our thoughts? How do we vote with our dollars? How do we vote with our values? I will tell you when it comes to the Muslim population from the financial institutions perspective, gosh, we are so underbanked in this country.
Mm,
When you look at like countries, whether including the United Kingdom, right? United Kingdom, countries in the Southeast Asia, the GCC. Muslims over there are, they have the institutions that cater to
mm,
their goals and aspirations.
yeah.
Not so much in the United States. And one of the things that I noticed, particularly in my past experience, is there's not many solutions that are offered from the bigger institutions to
That's true.
Muslim investors.
Mm,
And if you're going to do it, you got to go do it out on your own,
mm,
right? And while I was building this business and continue to build this business, a lot of investors are just taking their money and they see the title Sharia compliant and they'll throw their money at it.
mm,
Um, for me, I wanted to bring the financial planning, the investment management strategies that I learned in my past experience to the Muslim community. And if you take that same methodology with the Sharia compliant investment vehicles that they're out there, and I'm talking about the likes of like Wahid,
mm,
Azad, Amana,
yeah.
Sharia portfolios, right? And taking those investment vehicles and incorporating it into like asset allocation models, doing goals based planning and financial planning. That kind of experience, that kind of client experience, is what's going to help Muslims achieve the desired goals that they're trying to set for themselves, financially speaking.
Got it. And so that essentially I guess that didn't really answer the question, so sorry for that.
Mm.
The question was more so like, how did that desire come about? So it mainly came from October 7th. Is that correct?
October 7th, right?
Yeah.
But then also seeing how underbanked the
Got it.
Muslim community was from the
Yeah.
15 years that I
Got
spent
it.
there,
Got it.
right?
And that's is when you say underbanked, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so I'll tell you, like the four investment asset management companies that
Mm-hmm.
I provided you with, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when you go to some of these institutions and you ask them, like, hey, do you have any sure? I remember, in fact, let me take a step back. I remember when I was in leadership, a colleague of mine came up to me and said, hey, listen, I have a Muslim client, and this client is asking for Sharia-based investment vehicles for their portfolio.
Mm.
And then, obviously with, ignorance, when somebody thinks of Sharia-based, right, they think the worst, right?
Yeah.
And not really understanding that Sharia-based investments is just a form of legal framework per
Yeah.
se, right, on how Muslims conduct business.
Mm.
So I remember having a conversation, a sit down with this colleague to say, hey, listen, this person is looking to invest
Mm.
in their values, right? So
Mm.
don't be alarmed when they say they're looking
Yeah.
for Sharia-based investments. No different than anybody who was looking to invest in ESG strategies. And ESG strategies are environmental, social,
So,
governance strategies, right? Those who want to invest not in like companies who manufacture defense weapons
mm.
or in the alcohol business,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? The companies that are doing good for humanity.
Mm.
And then after understanding that, they're like, oh, okay, like I get this,
Mm.
right? And then when this person went to go see like what solutions are available that are
Mm.
out there, um, this our institution at the time did not have the functionality or the capability to be able to invest in those different asset managers, and that's just because we didn't have the relationship for it. Does that answer your
Okay. Yeah,
question?
yeah, that answers the question. Did you face any sort of mental struggles when you were building Wakil Wealth Advisory? Like, were there any sort of major, major pitfall moments, you could say, or major inflection points when you were trying to build out this company?
Absolutely,
Well,
absolutely. I will tell you if there's anything that I learned, and gosh, I say this in the most non-facetious way, right? When you read books on entrepreneurship, and one of the things that has highlighted with me in this journey is that having the stability of a paycheck really breeds
mm,
complacency. I will tell you now that I know I'm the one that's cutting my own check. Uh, I am the one that has to put all the effort in, right? And of course, with
mm,
God's help, and that goes without to say. but gosh, there is no assistant. You are, especially when you're up and coming, you're a solopreneur, so you're doing everything on your own, from the banking, the business development, the operations aspect of it. So particularly me, right? I'm wearing all the hats. I'm the CFO, the CIO, the COO, the CEO, right, and the CBDO. So I'm doing the business
So
development,
what's a CBDO?
chief
A
business
business
development
development. Okay,
officer,
got it.
right? So going out there prospecting for business, etc. And then I will tell you, and going back to the point of paycheck breeding complacency, I remember after resigning in that first month, I mean, it was just anxiety, right? I have a 4-year-old daughter who was going to a private school, and alhamdulillah, my wife is working, right? But I was the quote unquote breadwinner. And to see that income just fall off a cliff, right? It was scary to see. And that's where the Muslim comes out of you, right? Having that iman, the tawakkul, the taqwa, to have belief that, okay, you know what, if you have something, if you have an intent and you firmly believe in it, and you know that you are going out there, that you are going to serve a purpose to fulfill the needs of the ummah, gosh, I mean, that is so rewarding. I remember, again, having been filled with anxiety, if you ask me now, gosh, that anxiety is just like long gone. I have had the ability to build so many formidable and long-lasting relationship with clients, where even like the clients that I currently have under the umbrella, they've become referral sources for me. And now it's I would, gosh, the question becomes for me now, like, why didn't I do this sooner, right? If I knew, but the thing is, hindsight is 2020,
Of
right?
course.
Like, so, gosh, when I first took that step, it was filled with anxiety and didn't know where my next dollar was coming from. But now there's light at the end of the tunnel, and the relationships that I've built, I would not trade it for the world.
Wow, wow. So then, I guess one of the other questions that come into my mind is that, let's say I'm bringing to you $1 million. How do you determine a stock if it's halal or haram? Like, where's that criteria coming from? Is it coming from AOFI? Is it coming from another Sharia advisor? Where is that information, and how do you determine if a stock or a security or whatever it is truly halal?
Great question. When I decided to build this practice out, and I was, drafting my business development plan, one of the things that I received feedback on was scale, right? Scalability. And I will tell you, when you talk about like the likes of Ray Dalio, Carl Icahn, and so forth, right? They are stock pickers, right? They are going really into the finances of the companies, sitting with the boards directly, right? Grilling the board. And they're activist investors, right? And really and meeting with employees, senior management, etc. When I was building out my company, the one thing that I knew is that I couldn't, if I was going to go out there and stock pick, I would not be able to bring scale to my practice, because then at that point, when you're stock picking, right? To your point, I'm using Sharia-based screeners to see, if a particular security passes the test of Sharia screening. And then at that point, also continuing to have some kind of screening mechanism in place, right? Because it could be very, very much where one security may be Sharia compliant in Q1, and by Q2 they made some kind of investment where they became very leveraged, or a percentage of income became impermissible, and it's no longer passing the Sharia screener,
Got
right?
it. So give me an example of what that would look like a practical example.
So, for example, and this is just rule of thumb, right? You'll see that in Sharia screening, like if 5% of more of their income is from improper or impure sources, right? It fails the test, right? Or if they have more than 30% leverage, it fails the test, right? And it gets a little bit more sophisticated than that, right? But I just want to just say, just very generally speaking. If and then, also like what is the nature of the business, right? So there's so many factors that go into it. And that in itself, and mashallah, there's a lot of tools that are out there. Musafa, Zoya Finance.
Yeah.
There's so many screeners that are out there. But particularly for me, I did not want to be a stock picker, because then at that point, once you become a stock picker, right, It's one thing to do the Sharia screener, but it's like buying any other business. You got to make sure what is it that you're buying into, knowing the financials, who are the operators of the company, right? If I'm going to run a one-man shop and build this thing out, that in itself is a job on its own, right? That's why you have the Carl Icahns of the world and Ray Dalio who have portfolio managers, right? So for me, my methodology, if a client brought $1 million, what I am doing is, we're doing a financial plan, right? We're understanding like what are your goals? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Because from there we can get an understanding of what are the target returns that you're looking for to create a portfolio, right? And for us, the approach that we take, and to eliminate any questions of whether something is Sharia compliant, we build portfolios of funds in the context of where we've outsourced the Sharia compliant to the investment managers of those products that we're bringing into our portfolios, right? And then what we do is based on what the client's needs are, we'll construct a portfolio that fits the various different asset allocations to achieve the desired goals utilizing those products and so what that does is it eliminates the question of Sharia compliance, right? Because all the investment vehicles that we use
Are
are already
yeah.
Sharia compliant, right? And then also, like some of the investors that I work with, they happen to be institutions, right? And these institutions, like endowments, for example, when they're going out there and, particularly in the Muslim community, right? And they're talking to their constituents to say, hey, we have an endowment for our institution, please donate. And they want to know that, that their money is going to in a Sharia compliant fashion. There should be no question about it. And for me, that's how I've eliminated that is to say, you know what, we take the approach of portfolio funds rather than to go out and do individual stock picking.
And that's actually a very beautiful way of doing it, because if you were individually stock picking, it would be a nightmare. You have 100, 200 stocks, and you're having to monitor each and every single one. And if you don't have a big enough team, it becomes incredibly difficult to manage, right? And I guess the stock picker apps like Zoya, like you mentioned, that's also very interesting because like they also have, I believe they use the AOFI standard. What criteria that they use is just very, very interesting.
But to the
Yeah.
heels of that, right? What comes with stock picking is for us when we do portfolio construction, we're looking at so many different things, right? Diversification, concentration, and so forth. What happens with individual stock picking is you can do individual stock picking. It can be rewarding, right? I know several investors. I have several investors who are not a part of the models that I run, but they want to, work with someone who knows how to trade capital markets, right? And they want to, call the shots on the individual name picking. What happens in that space is that you are creating undue risk, right? If you are just an investor who has a subtle understanding of investing, right? And for somebody who is, like, listen, this is my, my egg basket, right? And I want to make sure I'm diversified. You're just doing individual stock picking and you have 5 stocks, and let's just say all of those 5 stocks happen to be tech stocks, right? And if you just remember about 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
we had a pullback of almost 8 to 9% on the S&P.
Yeah.
Tech stocks got clobbered.
Yeah, I think $2.89 trillion of value just eliminated in one day,
In one
right?
day, right?
Right.
So
Where does Wakil Wealth Advisory go from here? Right now, I guess just out of curiosity, how much in assets under management do you currently have? And how can we help you grow your business?
absolutely. So we have several million, right? I don't want to put a number out there
Okay,
because of regulatory perspectives.
perfectly fine.
Where does it go from here? Uh, when it comes to the topic of money, going back to the comment that I made that it being a topic of taboo, if there's anything that I have learned about this business is that if anybody does business with any wealth advisor, it's all done on the premise of truth and integrity, right? And for somebody like myself, I the vision that I set for Wakil Wealth Advisory was to bring the next generation of wealth management, particularly to the next generation of Ummah, right? So talking about the Gen Xers, the millennials, the Gen Zers, and so forth, right? And looking at it from a different way than what our forefathers may have looked at it through from a vision perspective. But secondly, growing it to be a trusted wealth advisory firm, not only in Atlanta, but nationally perspective, nothing would make me happier. And I shared this with in another podcast was to become a financial powerhouse in the United States, right? Where it competes with the likes of some of the money center institutions, as we call them, where there is an investment banking division, that there is a research division, there is a wealth management division to bring all, and a private banking division to bring it all under one roof, to be able to be a one-stop solution for the Ummah, where there's not so many competing spaces out there, but there's a one-stop solution for all.
Okay, mashallah. It's amazing. I guess what I'll do is I'll leave your socials in the comments section below, and then if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Gosh, DM me, right? Call me, email me. I am available. You are more than welcome to reach out to me in any way. You can even visit my website, www.wakilwealthadvisory.com. There's a link to my Calendly. Feel free to set up some time. Happy to meet with you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Oh, the
Ahmed.
pleasure's
It
mine.
was a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. And then, inshallah, hopefully we can grow your business in some way, shape, or form,
Inshallah.
even faster, and whatever needs to happen to make it grow across the United States.
Inshallah.
Just feel free to ask, and happy to assist in any way.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.